This is the Volkswagen Tiguan Allspace 1.4 Highline. Yes, this is actually the 1.4 litre model. Doesn't look like a cut price version, does it? The thing about the Tiguan 1.4 Highline is this is actually now the volume seller for the Allspace lineup. And it's been updated for the 2021 model year with a few extras like some new wheels, a new infotainment system and a couple of other things. So we're here to take a look to figure out why it is that customers seem to like this more than the 2-litre R-Line model that my colleague Izzat Shahar already reviewed. And more importantly, we're here to find out, is this the Tiguan Allspace that you ought to put your money in? My name is AIMAN, ABDULLAH, this is Malaysian Motoring. This is our review of the 2021 Volkswagen Tiguan Allspace 1.4 Highline. Now, as we take a walk around the Tiguan Highline, we're going to start at the front. So compared to the R-Line model, you get a slightly more sedate front bumper treatment, but you still get a full chrome grille and full LED headlights like we saw on the flagship model. Now, because this is not the R-Line model, the front bumper does look a little bit tougher. So it's got this little silver trim down here and it's meant to look a little bit more rugged versus the Tiguan R-Line's more aggressive stance. As we go down the side, you lose the 19-inch alloy wheels. Instead, you now get 18-inch alloy wheels. These are new for the 2021 model year and they replace the single-tone alloy wheels that came with this car previously. As a result, personally, I think this really uplifts the exterior design of the Tiguan Allspace Highline because the previous model with the single-tone alloy wheel looked a little bit low rent. With this, it now no longer looks like you've bought the cheaper model, even though you still have. You still get contrasting door mirror caps done in silver. They're not chrome, it's not brushed aluminium, it's just silver paint. You get a little bit of chrome here, where on the R-Line model it would have said R-Line, here it's just chrome. Down the side you get a little bit more chrome, you get this contrasting black body cladding, and again it just makes the car look a little bit more rugged. You do get these silver roof rails as standard and these are functional, so you can actually put a roof box up there should you so want to. And down at the rear you get new full LED taillights. These are actually the same full LED taillights that you used to get in the R-Line model, but it's now standardized across the range. And again, as a result, it does make this car look a little bit more premium and a little bit more posh than it used to. Again, because this is not the R-Line, because this is merely the Highline model, you get this contrasting bit of black plastic down here, and a little bit more silver down here, just like what you saw in the front. You still get a hands-free tailgate though, electrically operated, within which, as you can see, you can put a hell of a lot of crap. This is as a result of our filming and stuff. But in any case, this is a 7-seater, so these have the 2 rear seats folded flat, and you can see just how much space there is. You can put all this stuff in here without issue. You also have a tonneau cover, which can be put underneath the boot floor should you need it. But when the rear seats are raised, your rear cargo room is quite limited. So the 2 rear seats ought to be considered for occasional use only. If you want a full 7-seater, the Hyundai Santa Fe is a slightly better proposition. But enough about that, let's go take a look at the interior where there are even more changes coming your way. Now, stepping into the interior of the 1.4-litre Tiguan Allspace Highline, there are a few things worth noting. For starters, you now get the same virtual cockpit that you get in the flagship model. You now also get a new infotainment system, which still has physical knobs for your volume and something else, but it is a smaller overall unit compared to the R-Line. However, even though it is smaller, it's really not that big of a deal because this system functions so well and it's so crisp and it's so fast to react. You still have gesture control, which is still as useless as it ever is, but overall the presentation is nice enough that it doesn't feel low rent. Talking about low rent, or rather lack thereof, you still get the full leather upholstery as you did in the R-Line. You still get an electric driver's seat with memory functionality in this car. The steering wheel, however, is manually adjusted, but you have adjustment for reach and rake, so you can get the perfect driving position no matter what. You also have electric door mirror adjustments on this side. Your engine start-stop button is here, and everything in here is very logically laid out. It's very Volkswagen. That said, This interior, although very well appointed, it must be said that it does collect dust quite a bit. So in this top panel here, I like to keep a little cloth because this is literally what I do every time before I start a journey, because otherwise all the dust and the fingerprints will do my head in. Also, I don't quite understand why it is VW insists on having this volume knob where the power logo is on the knob and it moves with the knob. So as a result, every time I get a passenger, I tell them, if you want the volume to be adjusted, tell me. Whatever you do, don't touch the goddamn knob because it will do my head in. In terms of practicality, there is plenty of storage space. You have a very big door glove box. This is a glove box, it's not a door. I swear I'm a professional automotive journalist. You also get large door bins, big enough to actually hold a large water bottle, courtesy of a brand that doesn't sponsor us. You also get a large center console bin where you have a couple of retractable cup holders which you can deploy at a touch of a button. You also get a couple of USB-C ports and a 12-volt socket up front, and a bin that's actually big enough to fit your phone. The center console, it's worth noting however, is actually adjustable, so you can actually slide it back and put it back up like that and do that and all that nonsense. So you can get it to adjust to just the right position so that when you sit, you can rest your arm and drive along like a proper German. Anyway, so let's go and move to the back and see what's going on back there, because I promise you, in this SUV, there's still a lot more to talk about back there. So now that we're sat in the back of the Tiguan 1.4 Allspace Highline. I know I'm bungling up the name here, but it is such a mouthful of a name. Anyway, I'm under 170 centimeters tall. This seat is set up in my driving position, and look at the amount of legroom I have. It's enormous, and of course headroom is self-explanatory. Now, the second row of seats can actually be slid forwards and backwards as to maximize legroom back there or to maximize legroom in the front. So with a little lever, which I'm going to find here, you can actually slide it forwards like that, and even in its furthest most settings, I can actually still put my feet down here quite comfortably, and my knees still aren't even touching the front seat. Of course, like I said, the two rear seats are for occasional use only, so in that regard, most of the time it's going to be all the way back here, at which point you have an abundance of space. Talking about an abundance of things, you also get an abundance of practical features. So for starters, you get huge door bins, again big enough for the same orange water bottle that you saw on the front. You get tray tables which pop up like this, and then there's a little cup holder here, and there's even like this little tray here which is rubberized. Just this part is rubberized, so you can actually put a tablet and actually sits here and you can use it. I know this for a fact because I actually had lunch back here because I was too lazy to go up to my condo, so just put my phone there and watch Netflix. Anyway, enough about my pathetic personal life. You also get an armrest here with more cup holders, and it's worth noting that you get a 12-volt socket down here and another USB-C port, and because Volkswagen is ever so generous, you get rear aircon vents with your own climate adjustment. So that means that this car is 3-zone climate control. So again, this interior is very well appointed, and even though you're in the back seats, it doesn't feel like you're in the cheap seats. As far as I'm concerned, in terms of overall comfort, back here it is really good. As I'm no doubt you've seen, under thigh support is fantastic because it actually goes all the way under or just behind my knees, and as a result, over a longer distance, I'll be very comfortable back here. These seats are also 2-stage reclinable, so you can have them a bit more upright like that, or you can have them a bit less upright like that, or less upright, or actually this is like 5-stage reclinable actually. Oh, it goes even further. So you can actually lean this back really nicely, and I have to say it is very comfortable. Now, I'm not going to get into the third row because I am not interested in torturing myself, but the rear seats are again for occasional use only. They are suitable for small children under the age of 7 or 10, depending on how vertically challenged you might be. I speak as a short person, but to be honest, try not to use them that much. I would position this as a 5+2 rather than a proper 7-seater, but if you need to carry adults or small children back there for a short period of time, it is fine. You definitely don't want to subject people to be sat back there for hours and hours on end. This is not the car to do that. On top of that, the rear does not have its own aircon vents, which would be a pain in our market given how hot it's been lately. So just really think about it before you put people back there. But as I said, or maybe as I alluded to earlier, this car is built off the MQB platform. It's also got a 1.4-litre turbocharged engine with a 7-speed dual-clutch automatic. And so that promises that this car should be pretty good to drive. So let's go back into the front seat and find out what all that is like. Previously, I've reviewed the Volkswagen Tiguan Allspace 2-litre R-Line, which is the flagship Tiguan Allspace in this country. And when we reviewed it, we felt that although it was certainly a good car, the idea that it's a hot hatchback on stilts was somewhat of a misnomer, because despite its adaptive chassis control and all-wheel drive and whatever, it simply wasn't that engaging to drive. It still felt very much like a family SUV. But the thing about the Tiguan Allspace 1.4 Highline that we're in today is that it doesn't come with that misconception, at least not straight out of the box. Although it still has the same platform as the Golf GTI and Golf R, it's certainly not conceived as a hot hatchback on stilts, that's for sure. This is a family car through and through, and as a result, when you get in it, you immediately start treating it like a family car. So under the bonnet is a 1.4-litre turbocharged engine paired to a 7-speed dual-clutch automatic gearbox with power going to the front wheels. This powertrain may seem a little bit familiar because it's also the same powertrain used in some variants of the Volkswagen Beetle, which is now discontinued, as well as the Volkswagen Jetta. Behind the wheel, as I said earlier, because you don't have that misconception that this is supposed to be some sort of performance vehicle, you don't treat it as such, you treat it a lot more reasonably, and as a result, it's not quite so disappointing. I feel like the 2-litre R-Line fell short simply because its expectations were already placed even before you get into the car, whereas here it's more like a blank sheet of paper. Additionally, the exterior design, which is a lot more mature, more family oriented, means that again your mind is led to believe that this is not something that ought to be perceived as any sort of a performance vehicle, rather an out-and-out family vehicle. In terms of performance, this engine is adequate. It's not going to set your heart on fire, you're not about to set any speed records with this thing, but that's not really the point, is it? What you want out of a vehicle like this is good fuel economy, decent response, a decent amount of punch, particularly when you're driving on the motorway, and the ability to maintain relatively high motorway speeds for a sustained period or for a relatively long period during long distance cruising, and that is very much where this car is most comfortable. The 1.4-litre engine, as I said, has adequate performance, which means that when you're driving in town, the response is relatively fast and relatively punchy. You can dart in and out of traffic as you should so please, and you tend to very easily forget that this vehicle, that this SUV is quite as large as it is. But when you're out on the motorway, that's where the strength of Volkswagen products really comes into its own. So you get very little in terms of wind and road noise in this car, very little intrusion at motorway driving speeds. And thanks to the smaller alloy wheels, even though this car does not come with adaptive chassis control, it absorbs lumps and bumps really well. The primary ride in this car is fantastic, and the secondary ride in this car is also fantastic, very Germanic. It's not soft, it's not floaty, but it's very controlled, it's very well damped, and it feels like a very sophisticated vehicle, but that is what you tend to expect from a Volkswagen. If there is one little thing, it is the fact that although the engine in this car is adequate, because it's not particularly punchy, it means it does take a little bit of time to get up to speed. Whereas in the 2-litre R-Line, you can get up to 110 relatively quickly. In this car, it takes a little bit more time and a little bit more effort. Overtaking also does take a little bit more consideration because this engine simply doesn't have that much puff to give. But if you drive it deliberately and you drive it in a matured fashion, the way a family driver ought to, then this car is perfectly fine. And when you drive it as such, it does reward in terms of fuel economy. So for example, this car, we've done about 500 kilometers in it on a mix of urban roads and interurban roads and some motorway driving. We've tried to simulate an urban day-to-day drive as much as possible, even got caught in traffic a couple of times deliberately just to see what would happen. And as a result, this car is returning a very respectable 7.8 litres per 100 kilometers. Volkswagen passenger cars, Malaysia, I apologize for having hit that massive pothole. But because of this engine, because it has adequate performance, you never feel like it's lacking. In some of its competitors, such as the Honda CR-V and the Proton X70, it somehow feels that there is just not enough punch in the engine, whereas this car has no such issues, despite the fact that it is smaller in capacity versus the 1.5-litre TCP-IP engine in the Honda CR-V and the 1.8-litre direct injection in the Proton X70. This is a very good car by all measure. The only point that is a little bit sore for me is in terms of safety. So while this car's passive safety is certainly respectable in terms of the number of airbags and its crash safety ratings and so on, it is a little bit disappointing that this car does not come with any active safety features whatsoever. There is no autonomous emergency braking, no blind spot monitoring, no rear cross traffic alert, nothing. And I feel like that is a little bit too much of a compromise. As something that is trying to bill itself as a family car, you would expect it to offer a little bit more in that regard. Especially at this price point, at north of 150,000 ringgit, I would expect things like AEB and blind spot monitoring to be standard. So it is disappointing that this family vehicle does not offer anything in that regard. We're not really sure what VPCM is trying to do about that, or if they have any plans to do anything about that. I certainly believe that these cars would have a much better tactical advantage on the market if they offered some degree of active safety. Volkswagen Passenger Cars Malaysia, or rather the Volkswagen Group, does have the capability within their arsenal to equip these cars with it. So I'm really not sure why it is that the Malaysian market doesn't have it. But in any case, what do I think of this car? Well, as I said earlier, I think it's a very mature and polished effort from Volkswagen. In terms of 7-seater SUVs, this is certainly a respectable and impressive model. However, in terms of outright space, you would certainly want something like the Hyundai Santa Fe, which offers a little bit more room for the third row especially, and there are a few more accoutrements back there for passengers as well, such as rear aircon vents and so on. And in terms of overall drivability, if you're looking for something that's more performance oriented, this certainly isn't. And when you take that into consideration, again, the Hyundai Santa Fe does come out tops for being able to offer a wider range of powertrains, such as the 2.2 litre turbo diesel with its all-wheel drive system and 8-speed automatic gearbox, which makes it a much more competent highway cruiser. But if you want a 5+2 seater SUV that is very competent in town and is still capable of holding its own out on the motorway for the occasional long distance drive, then this may be a better choice for you. The smaller petrol engine means that it's a lot more refined, particularly at town speeds, but of course you have to pay that price when you go out on a motorway over longer speeds, over longer distances. But again, if you're the kind of person that spends most of your time in town and you do need those occasional seats, or if you just need a little bit more boot space over the Volkswagen Tiguan, then the Tiguan Allspace 1.4 Highline is perfectly adequate. That is exactly how I describe this car. Perfectly adequate. In any case, that's been my review of the Volkswagen Tiguan 1.4 Allspace Highline. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon so you're notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the description below. And if you'd like to follow me, the links to my social media channels are also linked in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, stay safe, jangan bodoh. We'll catch you in the next one.